Well, I had no idea I was coming to the equivalent of, the Canadian Journalism Oscars this evening. It was so much more exciting to see the real spotlight team than the ones on the screen, but also just to be in this room, vibrating with all this fabulous journalistic verve and passion and rigor and righteous zeal. It just when one is feeling demoralized, in a sense, by the plight of media, you come to here, to this room, and feel this marvelous surge and all the inventive ways that journalism is being reconceived as well as practiced. So thank you so much for inviting me. It's been a thrilling evening for me and an encouraging and moving one to see the kind of talent here. It's a special honor as well because Canada has such a stellar, undeniable journalistic tradition. No matter the medium, print, radio, video, digital, Canadian soil has produced some of the world's most globally recognized journalistic figures. It was really thrilling to see Lloyd Robinson tonight, such a great veteran of news, and to hear about these stories that he was such a central figure in reporting them and being the anchor that everybody depended on for the truth and for the sense of reassurance that he understood as well as told you about it. At the New Yorker, when I was editor, by the way, we were crawling with Canadians for some reason. Just crawling. I mean, from the wise eyes of Mavis Gallant to the even cooler and wiser ones of Alice Munro, from the zany intelligence of Bruce McCall to the contrarian smarts of your last year's honoree, Malcolm Gladwell, who joined the magazine, I think it was in my second year, and he came to me and said, I want to write this piece. He was actually doing book reviews at the Washington Post at the time. We brought him on. I noticed his stuff, and I asked him to join us. And he said, I want to do this column about the way that certain viral things catch on, and the question is why. And it was the tipping point. And from the moment he walked through the door, the guy was a superstar. It was, there wasn't even a discovery period. That was it. So that was very thrilling. And then, of course, there was Adam Gopnik, who was another great Canadian and a great writer, and one of my dearest friends. So I've done very well with Canadians, I have to say. But sometimes I do rather wonder why Canada has given Britain so many formidable press barons. You just minted these kind of mythic characters who, ran the media in the UK. William Maxwell Aitken, first Baron Beaverbrook. He was owner of the Daily Express, the Sunday Express, and the London Evening Standard. The great Roy Herbert Thompson, first Baron Thompson of Fleet. Incredible fruity titles they all had for themselves. Owner of the Times and the Sunday Times, and I'm very proud actually to have you at the table tonight with the third Baron of Fleet, aka David Thompson, who I doubt wears his ermine robes very much around here, but he's definitely is third Baron of Fleet. And then, of course, Conrad Black, Baron Black of Crossharbour, publisher of the Daily Telegraph. And I know a very controversial figure, but he actually was a very good proprietor of the Daily Telegraph. All of them were masters of thunder, all Canadians who forever changed media in Britain. And I have to say, it was their great British newspapers that instilled the gifts of the tabloid in me. Yes, that's not all bad, by the way. Mike Cook I have here who can back us up, right, Mike? Let's be honest, no one writes headlines with quite the exuberance of the British tabs. And one of my special favorites I remember was from the Falklands War in the 80s. Stuff it up your junta. I mean, it's peerless, really. Anyway, I absorbed it. And headlines, blurbs, and cover lines, I think, are some of the most important aspects of putting out a great publication. I even used to labor over every word on the index and contents page and tried to make them, the same kind of juicy come-on that Stuff It Up Your Junta was able to attain. And I've been lucky enough in my life to be given some great titles to edit and a couple to invent. And looking back on it now, I see my career as 4 weddings and a funeral. Tatler in London, Vanity Fair, the New Yorker, and the Daily Beast were all stories of happy success. They enabled me to discover and nurture some of the great talents of magazine journalism, such writers as Dominic Dunn at Vanity Fair and David Remnick, my darling David, who you saw on the screen, and photographers like Annie Leibovitz at Vanity Fair, who did some of the great covers like Demi Moore Pregnant, And of course, Richard Avedon, who I brought to the New Yorker and opened the windows of a magazine that had hitherto been all print with no photographs. And then, of course, Talk magazine, which I left the New Yorker to do, was a bit of a train wreck. But it was full of amazing young talent who went on to run major outlets all over the American media or become faces on camera. And it was a big heartache when it failed, but I learned more from my failure there than all the years really of getting it right. And in fact, it left me with such a respect for failure that when people come in to interview with me and I see a resume that's all success, I'm not interested. I think, A, it means they probably think they know everything, and B, I don't want them to have their first failure on my watch. So when I took the plunge into digital journalism to start the Daily Beast in 2008, it was like a wonderful return to my Tatler days in London. I was once again in a small room full of kids. Only now they were half my age, and the adrenaline was addictive, and we had an absolute ball launching the Daily Beast. Now, we then had a kind of a regression. We decided that we were going to go and buy Newsweek. That really was a bit of a perverse thing to do against all the prevailing headwinds. I sometimes think it was a bit like having an affair with your ex-husband and suddenly remembering why you left him in the first place. So we won't talk very long about Newsweek. It came and it went. But it did enable me to publish some really great, provocatively well-written pieces by the likes of Andrew Sullivan and another smart Canadian, David Frum. And when it was done, I realized that telling stories, such as I've been able to do all my life, is what I wanted to continue to do any way I could. But do it something different. Do it live and in the here and now, without the burdens of newsstand sales or publishing costs or stress of digital disruption, which really can, as I'm sure everyone in this room would agree, just become such, an aggravation, where you feel you're dealing with everything but content. And I miss just dealing with stories and content. That's all I want to do at this point in my life, stories and content. So all of us who love telling those stories have to find now ways sometimes of doing it in a new climate, because today's climate is so volatile. We're struggling to offer context and narrative and accuracy at a time when clickbaits and sound bites are really what everybody seems to want. But we're interested in telling stories about not what just happened, but what really happened. And that's the difference. So after years of print and digital media, I thought I wanted to focus that same journalistic obsession to bring unknown stories to the stage, stories that illuminate the courage and the cost and the loneliness of women who step up and lead. For some years, I've been involved with an NGO called Vital Voices, which mentors women all over the world and helps to, create networks for them and make them into leaders. And I'd met these women in many a retreat at Vital Voices and found them absolutely amazing. Women from Africa and India and the Middle East who were encountering so many unbelievable challenges, but were so feisty and fiery and brave and warm and incredible. And they didn't have a platform to tell their stories. Nobody really seemed to care or know about what they were doing, but they were toiling away. And I felt, why can't we bring these women to the stage and tell their stories in such a way, make it vivid and compelling, and make people interested, not only in them, but in the places that they come from, which get such scant coverage in most of the media today. And I just marveled at their amazing courage in fighting for the most basic parities when we have things, in a way, so much easier here. We just can't imagine what it's like to be living in a place where you're not allowed to marry the person you want, or to have an education, or to escape with and get custody of your children where you're not allowed to do so, and so on. So in March 2010, I assembled a small team of producers and journalists to mount our first Women in the World Summit. 2.5 days of live journalism at a small midtown theater in Manhattan. And we invited the most inspiring women we could find, nationally and internationally, to come and tell their stories of how they beat the odds and what those odds are day after day. Women such as Lima Bowie, the fiery Liberian activist, who led a peace revolution with Christian and Muslim women to help overthrow the dictator Charles Taylor. Or Sunitha Krishnan, the tiny Indian hero who saves women and girls from sex trafficking in Hyderabad. And the brave Robbie Damlin, a mother whose son, an Israeli army reservist, was killed by a Palestinian sniper, and she teamed up with a Palestinian mother whose son had suffered the same cruel fate. Today, they and other bereaved parents, Israeli and Palestinian alike, are turning their grief into a movement for reconciliation and peace. An amazing and inspiring woman. We gave these unknown heroes the same space and time as the headliner women like Hillary Clinton or Meryl Streep, and we made their unheard voices the loudest and most memorable of the summit. And since that first small, intense gathering, such a labor of love, Women in the World has grown with a momentum none of us could have expected to occupy the space where it lives today every April in New York's Lincoln Center, where we fill 2,500 seats, and this year generated 2.8 million video views on Facebook and over 700 million social media impressions. It's going to be not just an event, really, but a global movement and a new dimension, I feel, of journalism, experiential publishing, I like to call it, that can bring the world alive in ways we haven't really seen before. And now we're in Brazil, Delhi, and London, and I very much hope to come to Canada soon. You have so many incredible women and powerful stories, and in fact, in April this year, we already started that because we were inspired by the work of your two honorees, José Dupuy and Emmanuel Marchand, to tell the story of the missing Indigenous women of Canada, and we put together a fantastically powerful discussion about that topic, moderated by the NPR anchor John Hockenberry. Today, a lot of the time, I speak at journalism schools, and kids about to graduate ask me for career advice. I always recommend that they forego the usual resume path of trying to work at grand, established companies, and instead look for something small and shaky, like what I was blessed with at the Tatler in London in 1979. The shakier the better, because you'll have to do everything yourself, and that's when you make a mark. I was 25 when I was off at the Tatler with its staff of 7. Our motto was, if you don't have a budget, get yourself a point of view. My then boyfriend, now my fellow honoree and husband, taught me how to lay out a spread by drawing the crop of a photograph with a headline and a caption on the sitting room wall. I like to think it's still there, with a blue plaque commemorating my start as an editor. So never think something small or uncompromising cannot become big as the dreams and the energy and the rigor you're prepared to pour into it. I know we have so much rigor and fire and dedication in the room tonight of all the great journalists, all of you who are assembled. And I thank you very much for letting me be a part of it, and for bestowing me this wonderful honor that I'm going to treasure. Thank you.